Hi, this is Jennifer Dang, and this is my presentation on rhetoric and pop culture. So the example I chose is Sherlock, a BBC TV show that aired in 2010. It's a revival of Sherlock Holmes, the famous British detective who solves mysteries with his friend John Watson. The Sherlock in this TV show solves mysteries in present-day London, and BBC chose to portray him as less social than he is in the original book series. So here in this first example, we see John and Sherlock going to their first crime scene together.
I'm a consulting detective. The only one in the world that invented the job.
What does that mean?
It means when the police are out of their depth, which is always, they consult me.
But they still consult amateurs.
When I met you for the first time yesterday, I said Afghanistan or Iraq. You looked surprised.
How did you know?
I didn't know, I saw. Your haircut, the way you hold yourself, says military. But your conversation as you entered the room.
A bit different from my day.
Said trained at Bart, so army doctor, obvious. My face is tanned. But no tan above the wrists. You've been abroad but not sunbathing. Your lips really bad when you walk, but you don't ask for a chair when you stand like you've forgotten about it. So it's at least partly psychosomatic. That says the original circumstances of the injury were traumatic, wounded in action, then wounded in action, suntan, Afghanistan or Iraq. Is drinking.
How can you possibly know about the drinking?
Shot in the dark, good one though. Power connection, tiny little scuff marks around the edge of it. Every night he goes to plug it in to charge, but his hands are shaking. You never see those marks on a sober man's phone, never see a drunk's without them. There you go, see you were right.
I was right. Right about what?
The police don't consult amateurs.
Okay, so here in this example, we see that Sherlock's goal is to make himself look good. So his dignity is suffered a blow by John's innocent comment about police not consulting amateurs. He now has to persuade John that he's anything but. Sherlock uses impressive inductive reasoning to get his point across. He explains how he knew so much about John from their first one-minute meeting. Even if Sherlock calls what he does the science of deduction, he oftentimes starts from observing and collecting clues to reach a conclusion. That was especially the case when reading John, because Sherlock had not known anything prior to meeting him. Sherlock also redefines what he does as well. He clarifies, I didn't know, I saw. He controls the argument here because he's redefined the terms. In the end, Sherlock concedes John's point about police not consulting amateurs, but the concession works in his favor because he turns it against John, and that he is not an amateur. He redefines what it means to be an amateur by showing that he's not one. So, in this next example, we see Sherlock calling Anderson out to provide fallacies, and Anderson is a fellow forensics detective who Sherlock. Okay.
You need to question her. I need to question her. She's dead. Excellent. However, why? Is there a connection? There has to be.
Well, I doubt it, since she's been dead for 14 years. Technically, she was never alive. Rachel was Jennifer Wilson's stillborn daughter 14 years ago.
No, that's not right. Why would she do that? Why?
Why would you think of her daughter in her last moments? Yup, sociopath. Seeing it now.
She didn't think about her daughter. She scratched her name on the floor with her fingernails. She was dying. It took effort. It would have hurt. Used it on a phone, so it's a smartphone. It's email enabled. So there was a website for her account. The username is her email address, and all together now the password is...
Rachel, so we can read her emails, so what?
Anderson, don't talk out loud. You lower the IQ of the whole street. You can do much more than just read her emails. It's a smartphone. It's got GPS, which means if you lose it, you can locate it online. She's leading us directly to the man who killed her.
Unless he got rid of it.
Okay, so here, the bad example or misinterpreting the evidence is a second deadly logical sin. This fallacy is where examples don't support the conclusion. Here, Anderson misinterprets the evidence, resulting in him lessening the importance of what Sherlock questions or discovers. Like in Heinrich's example of the parent saying, seeing all those crimes on TV makes me want to lock up my kids and never let them out. Anderson's example of using the smartphone only for checking emails misrepresents the significance of finding the dead woman's phone's GPS. So this scene I was unable to upload, but I did provide a transcript where I wrote everything out, so it's right here. So the context of this scene is that a cabbie turns out to be behind the four suicides Sherlock and John have been looking into. He gets Sherlock by himself and reveals his plan. Even then, he doesn't threaten Sherlock because he's banking on the fact that Sherlock, because he's so curious, wants to figure out how the cabbie talked 4 people into killing themselves. So what the cabbie did was he ordered 4 people to choose one of 2 poisonous pills at gunpoint. Unfortunately, the 4 people would always choose the wrong one. So right before the scene, Sherlock has heard how he did it, and he's walking out. The cabbie is convincing Sherlock to stay back and see if he can choose the right pill to take. So in this exchange, Jeff the cabbie uses a lot of code grooming, which is insider language to get an audience to identify with the speaker and the main idea. This cabbie, in the last 10 minutes of the episode, talks about how he and Sherlock are very similar. He talks about how genius always needs an audience, and how they both have psychopathic tendencies. So in this final exchange, he, like Bush, catapults his messages by leaving logic out of them. Jeff doesn't allow Sherlock to get a moment of rational thought. If he were to stop talking and let Sherlock down the pill, or continue downing the pill, he would allow Sherlock's mind to have time to fill with doubts. So in the example here, he repeats the word bored, clever, and addict. Like Sherlock, he's addicted to proving himself clever. And like Bush, using his male code and female code and military code and his speeches, and like Bush's choice of using believe instead of think to appeal to his religious audience, the cabbie is using his sociopath code to convince Sherlock to follow through with downing the pill. So in this example, this is from the episode The Sign of 3. In it, John Watson is marrying Mary, and he has selected Sherlock to be his best man. However, a lot of people, such as Molly, a person in charge of the mortuary, and Miss Hudson, the landowner, doubt Sherlock's ability to deliver the speech, as he has proven very insensitive in the past. Sherlock needs to convince the audience that John's choice in him to be best man was well thought out, and that he's capable of delivering a heartfelt speech that focuses on his own virtues but his friends, which is tricky for Sherlock because he likes to talk about himself, and he struggles with expressing and understanding emotions.
It's for that big day, there is a certain... I'm afraid, John, I can't congratulate you. All emotions, and in particular love, stand opposed to the pure, cold reason I hold above all things. A wedding is, in my considered opinion, nothing short of a celebration of all that is false and specious and irrational and sentimental in this ailing and morally compromised world. Today we honor the death watch beetle that is the doom of our society, and in time one feels certain our entire species. But anyway, let's talk about John. If I burden myself with a little helpmate during my adventures, it is not out of sentiment or caprice. It is that he has many fine qualities of his own that he has overlooked in his obsession with me. Indeed, any reputation I have for mental acuity and sharpness comes in truth from the extraordinary contrast John so selflessly provides. It is a fact I believe the brides tend to favour exceptionally plain bridesmaids for their big day. There is a certain analogy there, I feel. And contrast is, after all, God's own plan to enhance the beauty of his creation. Or it would be if God were not a ludicrous fantasy designed to provide a career opportunity for the family idiot. The point I'm trying to make is that I am the most unpleasant, rude, ignorant, and all-round obnoxious arsehole that anyone could possibly have the misfortune to meet. I am dismissive of the virtuous, unaware of the beautiful, and uncomprehending in the face of the happy. So if I didn't understand I was being asked to be best man, it is because I never expected to be anybody's best friend. Certainly not the best friend, or the bravest and kindest and wisest human being I have ever had the good fortune of knowing. John, I am a ridiculous man, redeemed only by the warmth and constancy of your friendship. But as I am apparently your best friend, I cannot congratulate you on your choice of companion. Actually, now I can.
Okay, so here we see that Sherlock preempted his skeptical audience's thoughts. Oh dear. Okay, so that's just more on the context. And here's just a transcription. We see here that at the very beginning, he concedes, and by doing so, he preempts his skeptical audience's thoughts by first acting precisely how they expected him to act. There he scorns the nature of weddings, and he insults John, the bridesmaids, right here, and the nature of faith. So at the very beginning of the speech too, which wasn't shown in that scene, he fumbles and struggles to find what to say. So in doing so, he plays to the audience's expectations. As Heinrichs has said, a knowledgeable audience sympathizes with a clumsy speaker, and the dubitatio, appearing to be in doubt of what to say, lowers expectations and comes across as extremely sincere. So after Sherlock insults everyone in the room, he goes on to admit his faults right here, and which is one huge concession, and that the insults he said earlier couldn't be further from the truth, and that is his refutation. And that is more on dubitatio. So all the rhetorical virtues are met. He basically gets a free pass on virtues 1, which is proper language, 2, clarity, and 4, which is decorum, simply because of the nature of a best man speech. He only has to be himself. He doesn't have to dumb himself down for the audience because they are all already familiar with his delivery and advanced vocabulary. By acting as how he's supposed to, he fulfills proper decorum, because if he acted as anything else, it would come across as really fake. So he uses vividness, the third virtue, by first telling the story of when John asked him to be his best man, which was not shown in that scene as well. He makes the audience be invested in what he's saying through the story, and furthers their understanding that he was, and still is, surprised and honored to deliver the speech, because he finds himself unworthy to be such a great man's best friend. Finally, he uses virtue 5, ornamentation, through parallelism and connecting thoughts throughout the speech. He constantly surprises by seeming to go off on a tangent about himself or about the cases they pursue in the later part of the speech, but he always comes back to talking about John, subverting expectations and exceeding them. And here's my works cited page.